name is Figueroa, and I'll be moderating the panel discussion tonight. Before we meet our guests, I'd like to set the stage for tonight. Most of us are aware of the challenges of entering the job market, whether we are looking for our first professional role or we're graduating and trying to identify our first steps in our careers. Guess I gotta be louder. The national economy has been struggling, and unemployment is over 8%. The current unemployment in North Carolina is above the national average. There are some bright lights in this picture. First, the National Association of Colleges and Employers forecasts hiring will be up nearly 9% this year in the Southeast. This year promises to be the best since 2007 for new graduates. Second, college graduates typically have lower unemployment levels than the national average. Last month, the unemployment rate for people with at least a bachelor's degree was only 4.4%. And we are fortunate to live in a city with a vibrant economy based on banking, but also healthcare, real estate, entertainment, manufacturing, and many other industries. There are goods to be had, and that is what brings us here tonight. Tonight's panel has been invited to talk about how they make their hiring decisions. When we are looking for a job, they are our customers. By learning what they look for, we can present our qualifications in the best light. Please bear in mind this is not a recruiting event. The panelists are here to talk about their work, not to identify candidates or accept resumes. The panel discussion will take our guests through a complete cycle of interacting with candidates. We'll start with first impressions and physical appearance. We'll next consider any behavioral issues students should be aware of, and then we'll move on to the usual screening devices, the resume, non-interview social, and various aspects of the interview. We'll close with some consideration of how students can begin preparing for professional internship as early as their freshman year. Time permitting, we'll then ask our panelists about their careers. While I have a long list of questions, I'm going to move the panel through each of these topics. Please hold your questions until the end. We should have about 30 minutes for each of your questions. And finally, one housekeeping issue. When you signed in, you were given an evaluation form for this event. It's really important to us to get your reactions and your thoughts about this event. We're really excited and we want to know how it worked for you. It is now time to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Alicia Brown. She is a college recruiter at Lowe's Company, Inc., which is headquartered in Mooresville, North Carolina. She serves on the Site USA Career Connections Board with over 100 other college recruiters, human resource specialists, and business executives. Our next panelist is Sandy Guy. With 20 years of experience, Sandy Guy has extensive knowledge in all areas of human resource management. Sandy is currently the Director of Human Resources at Brewer & Walker and the Chair of International HR and Development Committee. She has partnered with national and international business leaders to align talent with many different organizations, as worked with manufacturing, hospitality, financial services, and accounting industries during her career. Sandy has also been recognized by Profiles in Diversity Journal, the American Society of Women Accountants, and Charlotte Business Leader for her many accomplishments. Wes Wen is the senior digital marketing consultant at Studio Banks. He was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. He attended the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and majored in economics. He soon joined Addison Whitney as their communications coordinator and then became the manager of marketing and sales. At Studio Banks, Wes uses his sales skills to identify and uncover new opportunities for growth. On the side, he's pursuing a skydiving certificate. And our last panelist is Stuart Sloan. Stuart Sloan is currently the manager of talent acquisition at TIAA Craft. He graduated Davidson College and majored in sociology. Stuart began working for the tech systems as a professional recruiter, both in Charlotte and Raleigh. He then worked at Wachovia as a senior recruiting consultant and oversaw the employment of all professionals within Wachovia's corporate and investment banking technology group in Charlotte, New York City, Philadelphia, London, and Hong Kong. He then joined TIAA Craft as a senior talent acquisition consultant and is now the manager. He oversees the recruitment of full-time employees for the technology and operations divisions. Our final panelist, who is not here yet, her name is Susan Elworthy, and she's the program manager for Finance Management Association program for Bank of America, also known as FMAT. And I'll give you a little bit more about her when she comes. So let's begin. Oh, wrong one. What is the first thing you notice about a candidate? Alicia, would you like to start?
The first thing, is this what kind of career fair or
Doesn't matter, anyone. What's the first thing?
probably appearance, how they're put together. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Really? My lips are moving, nothing's coming out. I would say certainly appearance and how that person holds themselves, whether they approach you, can engage in a conversation without being prompted. That's usually what I notice.
mine's kind of similar. For me, it's what I would call an energy level. Especially if you're at a meet the firms or a career fair and just somebody kind of walks up and ho-hum looks at you. Well, I don't want to talk to you. I want you to be excited to talk to me. And so it's certainly appearance goes without saying that everybody notices that first. But I think for me, it's the energy level and the willingness to, even though you're probably shaking in your boots, to come up and just at least say, hey, and get the conversation started.
For myself, I see eye contact tells a lot about an individual. I am, in essence, in sales. So as I grow the organization, as I grow the departments, I look for individuals that show confidence. I'm not looking for someone that has a cookie cutter smile as if you're trying to be Vanna White. So just be genuine, be real, be confident, but also look excited, or at least be excited about the person you're talking with and understand where we're coming from as well.
I think what's important is punctuality. So people that show up on time and present well, are dressed appropriately, and also a handshake when they do come meet you. The dead fish, I don't like the dead fish. I want people to be confident, and I think that goes a long way.
But speaking for the females, you don't want the crusher either.
Does it make a difference if it's at the career fair or an interview or a social event? How can a student impress you when they first meet you in an interview?
Don't let me do all the talking. Do not, the purpose of an interview with any of us, to me, it's always a bad interview if the interviewer does all the talking, because you didn't learn anything about the candidate, you didn't get to talk about yourself. Of course, we have to kind of tee it up and ask certain questions, but talk, that's what you're there for. And what I always tell people is, practice. I know it feels silly to practice with your roommate or somebody in your family. Find your neighbor, but if you're not comfortable talking one-on-one and that interviewer has to drive the conversation, I'm willing to bet all four of us would probably put you in the no pile just if we had to put a word out of you.
You guys have a great career center here. Use it. It comes with your tuition package. They can help you with your resume. They can help you do. I've been on campus many, many times doing mock interviews for them. So they'll call business partners and ask us to come in. So that's just more practice for you, to be able to do that. And it can probably help you land a job just by that extra practice, for sure. The 80-20 rule, the candidate should be talking 80% of the time. The recruiter or the hiring manager should be talking 20% of the time.
And for myself, I've interviewed numerous people that I call them, they've replied, but when I ask them what they know about the organization, it's a very half, response. And as a result, it's a total turn-off, because if I took the time to vet you through the process and took the time to block hours off of my colleagues' time to meet with you, I expect that you're going to be a selling candidate. Otherwise, you make me look bad. And as a result, sometimes I cut you off and make you leave before you even get to meet my other colleagues.
And what's in line with that, what I always started asking candidates, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, because you get the agenda ahead of time of who you're going to meet with, and I always ask, did you Google or LinkedIn look up who you're meeting with? Oh, no. I said, really? Because we all did you. So I think to be prepared, if you are not on LinkedIn, you're out of your mind. I know you're thinking, I'm a college student, it's not for me. Yes, it is for you. But Google who you're going to meet with and know something, because they'll pull up like articles they've written or whatever, and you can reference it and point it out. So that's a great point, is being prepared.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing, is going into an interview prepared, do your research on the internet, look at the company website, read. They lay everything out there because they're marketing to different customers. Read about it, and then think about questions. Come to the interview prepared. Have some questions, so when you get through the process at the end, they're going to ask you, do you have any questions for me? And you're going to have some research questions that they're going to be like, wow, that actually we are going in that direction, and this is why. It's impressive.
I'm just going to interject really quickly. I was to introduce everybody to Susan Elworthy. She's the program manager for Finance Management Association program, also known as FMAP for Bank of America. She graduated from the University of Florida with a degree in history. She's currently responsible for the leadership development of 30 participants. As a program manager, she plans and executes a learning curriculum and facilitates the rotation and post-program placement activities. She has held positions as a campus recruiter, university relations manager, regional university recruiting manager, staffing manager in the financial service and public accounting industry. She currently lives in Charlotte, North Carolina with her husband and 2 children. And Susan, we were just talking about first impressions and what are some of the first things that you notice about a candidate and how you can impress them, if you would like to add anything to that.
Great. Well, I don't want to just reiterate what you all have said, but first impressions do make a big impact in the interview process, the decision process, the networking process throughout your career. So it is very, very important. It's eye contact, warm handshake, appropriate dress, a strong voice. It's, all of those things brought together in that 30, or I should say 3 to 5 seconds of the introduction. So it's everything you hear about, and it is very, very important in the process.
We are now going to go to what I view as the fun part of this panel. I'm going to put up a series of pictures, and there you have a question. Interject and be as honest as you like. Would you hire me? If you could state what's wrong with those, if you would hire them, if you wouldn't hire them, what's wrong, if you would hire them, what's right. There is, for those, if you can see, there is a screenshot right there. Wes, would you like to start?
Well, I work at an agency environment, so one of my colleagues has purple hair this week, the other has pink hair this week. So for me, it's not as important, but at the same time, it's contingent on your role. See, I'm a client-facing individual. I'm, in essence, the spokesperson for the organization. So for me, it's important to portray a clean cut in this particular city. Now, our office is in other locations, as I've been in Germany and Japan. It's a little bit more different. If you've ever been to Japan specifically, you'll know what I'm talking about. So for me, these 2 individuals, that's fine. But they may be trying to do too much, especially the guy in the suit, the skinny tie. I'm sorry, but that's just like poser to me.
Anyone else want to add anything?
I would say I wouldn't out of the gates, and I'm in public accounting, I wouldn't out of the gates say no, but because for her I'd say, hey, brush the hair, pull it back, you do at least have a jacket on, whatever. But I think if I had 2 candidates and I had somebody who wasn't a poser, had her hair more conservatively done, and all things being equal, they may even have a little bit higher GPA or may technically be a little bit better candidate, I'm naturally going to go to the other ones. I would say I would immediately say no way, but if there was somebody else that was a little bit better packaged, they would have the edge.
I would agree. I'm sorry. I'm in banking and worked in public accounting. Again, I think it's kind of a package. So initial, fine, let's see what you're made of. Again, eye contact, smile, enthusiastic, warm handshake. Those are some things that might actually take the place of maybe a more relaxed dress, if it should be a little bit more formal or more professional. Again, I think they're fine from first impression, not really seeing much else. Not too concerned, wouldn't automatically say absolutely not. I guess we won't be screening anymore. We'll pass the microphone back and forth. Any other thoughts?
Oh, I love pictures over. So, what if I met you like this at a job fair? And I don't know if you can tell, the guy to the left does have a piercing on his lip.
This is an American Idol, I'm saying no. Not for me,
Yeah, I would add, it depends on where you're trying to work, right? And if you're out on the West Coast, maybe a technology firm, you can potentially dress like that or have piercings and whatnot. If you're going to work in financial services and come work at our company, I would recommend for first appearance maybe removing those and not drawing attention. All right, it just depends where you're going to work and how conservative the company is. So in this situation, I wouldn't recommend that for the first week.
Again, I think it goes back to the whole package as well. Obviously, the person with the piercing has a tie, a jacket on. I don't know much about lip piercings, but is it something you can remove without too much problems? Just think about those kinds of things. And again, it does depend on the position. I've supported our technology and operations group from a Bank of America standpoint, and the gentleman on the far side, I recruited at, not to mention other schools, but like at an MIT for technology, and there were plenty of students that walked up. Again, it's the environment and what they will be doing and what we're looking for. If you're client-facing, as mentioned by Wes, the group that I support currently, our finance group, is a little bit more on the conservative or professional side, so it depends. And once you get in, you'll see there's a difference in people dressing what floor you work on. If you're working with senior managers, and you're looking to progress your career, you just kind of think about that. So just something to think about. I'm, again, from a job fair standpoint, depends on what you're recruiting for, what you're looking for, what the role is. And there are a whole lot of other things, how, is it clean? Are you, again, it's eye contact. It's a couple of other things that might actually get you back to the point of interacting and kind of winning those points, et cetera.
And one more comment on that last one is just so you know, I mean, it's no longer Wachovia, but when you worked downtown Wachovia, you had to dress like a banker. But CIC is up here, and it was kind of the operations hub right here on Harris Boulevard, and it was acceptable to wear Crocs or Birkenstocks or jeans because it was kind of a back office type environment. So, it depends on the position, depends on the company and the culture, so just so you know.
And if you're going for an interview, I always say dress a little bit better. Always dress a little bit more to impress, right?
It's not about you. You want to bring attention to what's here, not what's here.
Very good.
What about the lady with the red? The red circle.
At a career fair?
At a career fair, yes.
If it's a career fair, like on campus,
On
on the
campus
day where they
career
had been to class, I'm a maybe.
I laughed because I read the questions, and you're going to get to what do you recommend for freshmen and sophomores. I think it depends on the level. If they're looking for an experience and experiencing what it's like to go to a career fair, I think it's fine. If you, again, are very clear, you're looking for your first job, getting ready to graduate, you're looking for your first job, you know exactly what you want. If, and again, it depends on the position. If she's looking for an investment banking job, I probably would have said go dark blue, black, gray, jacket, suit, very conservative, very professional. If you're looking for, it just depends on the job. It's doing your research, understanding the company you're going to look at, what you're going to be doing, the environment, the culture, that sort of thing. And I think that's probably what's going to dictate what you wear. It's a maybe. In a career fair, I'm not too concerned if it's a career fair in the summer, if it's, it could be all kinds of different options. But, I don't think it's inappropriate. I don't think it's, bad in any way. It's just not a wow.
Thank you. This is very great insight. So from talking about how when you first meet them, and then talking about their experience, what about the nonverbal behavior, such as handshakes? How does that weigh on your decision, and do you have any stories regarding that behavior?
I can take this because this is my job, is to go on campus can you all hear me? Okay.
Yeah, now.
Can you hear me now? As far as the handshakes go, I shake hands all day long, and I think if you have a really good handshake, you have great eye contact, it's going to set the tone. You talked about energy earlier. That's going to set the tone for the engagement of that conversation. I think if your hand, we talked about kind of the dead fish, you can, usually tell that person that is on the other side of the dead fish handshake typically will have, won't be as engaged, maybe is a little more withdrawn, it all goes together. So practice your handshakes. The other thing is, if you're not paying attention to me as a recruiter when I'm talking to you about, you just asked me about opportunities and I'm talking, and you're kind of like looking at the giveaways behind me on the table, looking at the booth next door to see, kind of what's going on there. That's a complete disconnect, and you just come off of my potential list to look at you as a candidate.
One of the things that I was putting, it's a verbal, but I put it in the nonverbal category that we're talking about. Keep in mind that you may have just come up to our booth at a career fair, but we've probably been standing there for about 2 hours and probably talked to 100+ people. So do come and engage with me and then move along, because if you sit there, it's what we call the stalker. Well, I don't know if y'all do, we call it the stalker effect. But it's somebody who comes and you so want to work at that organization and somebody's talking to you and you will just pull anything out and you will talk and talk and talk. Well, what you're going to do, your recruiter, is, somebody mentioned genuine earlier. It starts coming across as not very genuine because you're just reaching out for things to talk about. But we have a whole other group that we need to talk to, and quite honestly, we're getting tired. So it's engage, make contact, swap a card. If you've been standing there talking to somebody longer than 5 minutes at a career fair, you need to move on. The other thing is, at the end of the career fair, when we're tearing the booth down, a lot of people that I connect with for the 5 minutes, they'll come back at the end and say, hey, I just want to say thanks, it was great meeting you. That's fine, but move on. People who sit there and talk and talk and talk for like 20 minutes while you're tearing the booth down, again, you will start getting a negative image. Because, and I'm just being honest, because you're tired and you've been there all day, so I'm not going to remember, wow, that cool guy that had this on his resume. I'm going to go, the girl who would not quit. Do y'all remember the girl at the booth that just would not go away when we were done tearing it down?
The guy who followed you to the car.
The guy who do not follow the car, especially if you're a guy and the recruiter's a girl. Do not follow candidate girls to the car. But do think about, I know you're talking and you may think it's engaging, but even if you were having the best conversation, what a recruiter will do will say, hey, we got tons more people to talk to. Here's my card, shoot me an email. Hey, let's go grab coffee or whatever. But just keep in mind how much of your time and what they've been doing all day. I'm sorry with that.
Okay, so the next question I have is, what do you expect to see on a student's resume?
I'll answer that. So here's the situation. When I write, or when the team writes a job position, we strategically think about every bullet point. And if you're going to ignore it or carbon copy exactly what it says, but then when we interview you, we're going to find that out. So be honest about it. If you don't have experience in that direction, then the cover letter could help in facilitating why you deserve an interview. So the whole purpose of a resume is to catch my eye as a recruiter. I take less than 10 seconds to review a resume. Honestly, I have literally 100 resumes that come in every week. I don't even have to have an ad up. It still comes in. And we're a small agency. I can only imagine what you guys face. So that's me.
I think it's important to put your GPA on there. I mean, it's information that we're going to look for anyways, and if you do put it on there, it benefits you. They don't recommend putting your picture on the resume. They believe there are resumes that come over those with their picture, and it's pretty embarrassing, I think. So those are a couple things, suggestions.
Well, I would say, and especially because I know there's good international student mix here. I know internationally, your picture on a resume is required, so that may seem kind of odd. As an HR professional, when somebody has their picture on their resume, from a risk perspective, it makes me nervous. So I know if you're an international student, chances are you're used to, of course you put your resume, you put your picture on there, your family, I'm married, I'm whatever, leave it off. And Career Center can be great about telling you what to leave on and leave off. What I expect to see is what makes you different. And I know a lot of people say, well, I'm not different. You'd be surprised. You are different. You just don't realize what makes you different. If you are financially paying for any of your education, if you're working and going to the school at the same time, put it on your resume. I'm going to want to interview you before I interview somebody whose daddy's paying 100% of their way and they have a 4.0. If you're working, have a good GPA, and are paying for part, if not all of your college, I have all the respect for you, and I'm going to want to talk to you. I don't know if that applies to everybody else, but I know for me, put that on there.
I agree with everything. Definitely GPA. I would certainly make sure you put your, obviously your school, your degree. I have an opinion about the objective. Putting it, I've seen it hurt more than it helps. So if you're gonna put an objective, make sure it is right on point, on target. It doesn't mention anything specific like the company you wanna work for, because it could fall into the wrong hands and they're gonna knock you out. So again, you know, I know the question is, should I put high school information and that sort of thing? I wouldn't recommend putting that on your resume unless you were the valedictorian. Again, something that's gonna really set you apart. Absolutely work experience. When you put work experience, I strongly recommend you quantify it. Don't just say, I, you know, sold clothes to, you know, customers. I want to know how much, you know, did you increase sales? Again, quantify it. You know, interests are, they're okay if it's something that you're very good at and it's something that you can, you know, draw from your experiences and that sort of thing. Ultimately, we don't want to see anything personal, especially from an HR standpoint, because it does make us nervous with regards to risk issues. So certainly recommend that. Spell check. A great example of something, many years ago, I actually recruited at a university in the Midwest, and very strong university. I was recruiting for the investment bank, high yield, very popular role, very good money, all of these things. She had some spelling errors on her resume. We gave her an opportunity to make the correction. She said she made the correction, it came back with different spelling errors. So just have somebody, your career service, there's so many resources out there, your roommate, your significant other, your mother, your father. Reach out to the people you met at the career fair and say, hey, you know, I'm not ready for a full-time position, but I'd like to network with you, would you mind looking at my resume? I look at resumes all the time for my employees' children, you know, the employees' children, things like that. Ask somebody to review that, that's gonna help you a long way. Another real quick example, real senior person sent a resume, I phone interviewed them, and they were okay. And part of that came from the level of the person that was referring this person. I expected them to absolutely wow me. Their resume was only okay. They had so many resources at their fingertips to really knock it out of the park. They went to a good school, they had a pretty good GPA, but she fell flat. She didn't, you know, practice reviewing her resume. She wasn't able to articulate what was on her resume. I think it's very important to know your resume. Know what's on there, be able to tell the story if you get to the point of talking about it. But it is, 10 seconds is absolutely the case. And you know, especially during fall recruiting season when you've got several schools you're looking at, numerous resumes, you really become mechanical, and it's a quick review, a yes, a maybe, and a no, and you don't want to be put in the no pile. You definitely want to get to the yes pile, let's say that, because just the amount of resumes we get. So certainly utilize your resources to get your resume right. No spelling errors.
I would just add to make sure that your email address is correct and put a telephone number on there. I have literally a stack of resumes on my desk, great candidates. I have no way to contact them. I don't have the time in my day to start searching, call career services, that type of stuff. So there's candidates that could have gotten on an interview schedule, could have gotten a phone interview with our hiring managers, and won't, just because they left that really vital, you know, in the tech world that we're in, you know, email's probably the most used, I would say. If I get a bounce back, I might try the phone number, but I mean, it's a tragedy when I see it, and, you know, it could be a really good candidate.
Okay, on to the next question. Many companies have free interview socials prior to the real interview. What are some mistakes that you've seen students make at these events?
They think it's just social and you're not being considered for a job. I think what's always interesting to me is when you have a social, And it's great because you're in casual attire and most of the time, you know, the employer's in casual attire. And when we have socials, we tend to bring your peers, so it's people closer to your age and not my age. And so it's a relaxed environment. And what happens is recruits, I think, forget that you're still kind of trying out and do some dumb things. Chances are the organization's not paying for alcohol. Don't you dare buy yourself drinking. I don't care if you're 21 years old. I don't care if you're 42 years old. Do not drink at a social because you're probably thinking it's just one. I've seen people do stupid things with just one. Those lines go down. And the other thing that they do, they get very friendly with their peers. And it's like, oh, let's friend on Facebook. Okay, I'll friend you on Facebook. They friend on Facebook, and then the employer goes back and goes, wow, I saw some freaky stuff on their Facebook page. I would never Facebook with somebody who's a recruit. I would wait until I had the job to do it if they wanted to, but don't forget, you are still trying out with that company. I don't care if you're in your jeans. I don't care if you're at a tailgate or the lake. You are still being assessed against other candidates at any event that you're at. Sorry, that's my rant. My worst horror stories are from the
No,
social
I mean, I
events.
think it's one of those situations, right? Sometimes they have a really nice spread, and the event's over. And then you go and take 20 cookies back to your door.
Yeah.
It's noted, right? It's like, why did that guy just do that? Why did that guy just do that? So, you know, don't do that. You know, you're being judged, right? We have one role, there's 20 people. You make one mistake, you're out. You're out. So, no, I don't mean to put more pressure on you, but it's common sense, some of this stuff.
Yeah, eat before you go.
How can students prepare for their first interview?
Practice, practice, practice. And that skill never ends because if you can talk to the panel here, you're gonna take that with you for the rest of your life. And if I got to the point where I wanted to start interviewing for another job, I'm gonna start that same process that I probably used 10, 15 years ago to get myself prepped, so that you get better and better at it. But you still need to practice so that the flow goes good, you kind of have your thoughts together. Practice with your friends, your peers, again, career services.
Yeah, I think for this, you can go online and there's probably a lot of different interview guides out there where you can actually read them and think about situations that you had in your life, your experience, your work experience as examples, right? They're gonna ask you the cookie cutter question, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, right? Have those prepared in your minds, and when it's asked, you can, quickly respond and give a positive answer.
That would be similar where you said, know your resume, but I always tell students when you're interviewing, know your story. And I'm not saying make up some fun, cool story that makes you different, just be honest with yourself about what your story is. So if you had this first career that was fabulous and then the market tanked and you had to go back to school, that's okay, own that, embrace it, and know how to communicate that. Because the very first question I'm willing to bet all five of us asked during an interview is, so tell me about yourself. Know how to answer that and know, again, your story. I don't want you to tell me a ton of personal stuff, but I want to know, for the accounting students in the room, I want to know, well, what made you choose accounting? What made you choose to come here? Because it really helps me see your decision and how much you know about your story. Do not hide from something that you perceive is negative. It's funny, you said the GPA. I think if you leave your GPA off, you're hiding something, and I want to find it out. So if you're worried that, hey, my GPA is low, or hey, I'm a year behind, or I'm this, or I'm that, or whatever, own it and come out of the gate and say, hey, my concern is, your GPA threshold is 3.5 and I'm right at a 3.2. Am I kind of wasting my time to say it that way? But is it worth my effort or whatever? Own what's negative about you. I can't speak for them, but I know if you come up to me and directly say, hey, here's my deal and here's what I'm doing about it, I'm gonna have a whole lot more respect for you if I find out, in an in-house interview or something like that.
I'm sorry. From where I've come from, we do use behavioral-based interviewing, so very similar to what they've said, understand some specific situations that you've been in. don't embellish, because the technique of behavioral-based interviewing is ultimately asking probing questions to be able to identify if somebody is truly telling the story and what truly the behaviors they got out of doing the situation that they were in, or the activity or the situation. It is very important to be prepared. Thank you. Be prepared, know your story, have some examples. I was recently at a school, fabulous resumes, strong GPAs, the exact degrees that we're looking for. Started asking questions, reviewing the resume, trying to understand just a little bit about the people that I was interviewing. And unfortunately, when I got to ask about specific examples of, where they had challenges and things like that, ultimately I wasn't able to really get good, strong detail. I got very surface answers. I felt like people were trying to answer the question based on what they thought I wanted to hear. And the sad thing is that I don't know what I want to hear. I want to hear from you, and that's what's going to help me understand what I'm looking for. So unfortunately, although I was so excited to see these great resumes with great GPAs, great majors, I just really wasn't able to get the detail that I was looking for to say, okay, this person, if put into a situation in 2 years, will most likely act or behave or utilize the skills that they've learned in the past in order to really be the person we want them to be in the organization that I work for and that you all work for. So certainly understand some of the philosophies. I think from the night before reception, ask what kind of questions do you ask? Who's going to ask technical questions? Who's going to ask behavioral-based interview questions? Get to know the people. Ask questions. When you go into the reception, definitely be prepared with questions. Do your research. When you go into an interview, know your company. The internet is a wonderful place. I was around when the internet wasn't really around and people had to go and look in their library for the annual report and review that. Yikes, that was a little bit painful. So you have so much information at hand. Please utilize it. It really impresses the company that you're interviewing with to say, hey, I cared enough to go on the internet and do some research about some current events that are affecting. I think we all have probably been very, very involved in a lot of things that are going on, me in particular, I think, with from banking, Wells Fargo, from that standpoint. So, there's a lot of information. It drives a lot of conversation. It gives you a great opportunity to really have an in-depth conversation, share who you are. And I think I'm getting the buzzer to hand over. Sorry, I got on my soapbox. But I think it's so important. Be prepared in an interview. I don't want to happen to you all what happened to me at another school a couple of weeks ago.
What advice do you have for students who are freshmen and sophomores to help them prepare for internships in the future?
So I do recruit for interns at my agency, and at my last company, Addison Whitney, anytime so there's a distinguishing factor as far as the questions that you may ask directly to an employer when you're in an intern position versus when you're at a full-time role. If you're seeking a full-time role, I'm not looking to teach you how to do the job. You have to convince me that you are more than qualified to meet that particular role. Now there's career progressions down the road in your career path, but I'm not there to answer those types of questions. In the internship, I'm okay with you asking what are the possibilities for me to learn this, but make sure you have a clear-cut reason why you're applying for that particular internship, and at the end of the day, know exactly what you're setting yourself up for. So therefore you say, by me taking this position, I'm just usually setting myself up for this particular role in the future. This is where I see myself. We're not here to be your career counselors. We're not trying to tell you, oh, this is what you may want to consider. That's not the right setting. By the time you apply for an internship, you better know that this is absolutely the direction I want to take my career. Hopefully that makes sense.
The one thing, I think the question is from an intern. One of the things that I really, going to career fairs, I know we talked a little bit about that, I I recommend every freshman and sophomore, whether you're in jeans and a t-shirt or something, just go in and walk through a career fair. It's a very frightening thing before you actually get there. The anxiety is probably worse than the actual experience of walking up to a company. So freshman year, go to the career fair. You don't have to talk to anybody, just experience it and watch and observe and see how people interact. See what they're wearing, see how they walk up to a table. So your sophomore year, okay, dress in maybe a suit, kind of start getting comfortable doing that. Review the companies that are there. Think of companies that you'd be interested in working for. Walk up to there. Some companies do hire interns between their sophomore and junior year. I think more often than not, companies tend to look for the rising seniors. But once you get to that junior, when you're a junior, and it's very important to have an internship, you are much more comfortable, you're much more prepared for the anxiety that goes into just walking into a career fair. Do your research. This is kind of, if I were to go into a career fair, what I would do is I would list out the companies that I really wanted to talk to, the companies that I'm kind of interested in, but maybe, and I would start with the ones I'm kind of interested in, kind of get my elevator speech going and kind of get comfortable with what it is that I'm talking about. Because 30, 45 minutes into it, you're going to get much more comfortable, much more relaxed, much more, prepared for the questions that they might ask you. Once you get 30, 45 minutes into it, then you go to the companies that you're really, really interested in, and you're going to shine. You're going to be prepared. You're not going right off of the street into it. Again, I recommend freshmen. I love to see freshmen at career fair. I'm like, excellent, I'm so glad to see you here. You're really prepared. So certainly recommend that. Also talk to your friends who are interns.
Anyone else have anything to add to that? How does extracurricular activities count in your evaluation?
Depends on what that extracurricular activity is. Oh, I'm sorry, I have one. It depends on what that activity is. Some of it, it can be a turnoff, and I think one of you mentioned that, or sometimes your personal interest or whatever can kind of be a turnoff.
Really good.
But it depends. I have to be honest. I've seen some people who, I love study abroad. Oh, I love people who study abroad because I can sit there and talk to you forever without being stalked. It just really depends. If you've done something extracurricular that's really kind of cool and different and unique, which goes back to what I was saying, what makes you different, your extracurriculars can make you different, put it on there. Because so once you get to the interview phase and we all look at, I'm prepping for an interview and I look down the resume and I kind of figure out, okay, if I get a non-talker, what am I going to ask them about? And I'll pull a couple of key things out. And I'll always look at the extracurriculars because sometimes it's, somebody who's like, if somebody was getting their skydiving certificate, I'd be like, okay, note to self, save 5 minutes to ask about that because that's really cool. So it kind of helps drive the conversation, and sometimes, again, it's going to differentiate you. So some of us are looking at, no joke, 500 resumes, and you get associated, whether you like it or not, by certain things. And I was telling them the story earlier about this girl who was a great candidate we'd sent an offer to, but she's forever known as Feather Girl. And it's because you're having to differentiate in your head. So if you had on your extracurriculars that you were certified to skydiving, you were teaching skydiving, I'd be, oh, y'all remember Skydive Guy? Oh yeah, Skydive Guy. So don't be known for the negative thing that we're naturally going to pick up and go, oh, remember the guy that wore the wrinkly pants, wrinkle pants guy. It happens. If y'all say it doesn't, you're lying. Have something cool that's going to stand out. So I would say it doesn't maybe help me evaluate the candidate, but it does stand out. Do you evaluate?
Well, I think one thing is there are going to be situations where you might not get an internship, right? But you are part of a club or a place to work, and there's leadership opportunity there. And that, to me, is almost like an internship, and you can promote that at what you did for those organizations or what you did for that sport. So don't forget that and note that, because it is of interest, and we're going to probe on that if we see it on there.
I do have a tip. When you choose an organization that you want to be associated or you want or us to evaluate, consider opportunities outside of the bubble, as I call it, outside of the university. I'm on the board of the American Marketing Association. It's so rare that I see UNCC students other than Matt Murrow, who happens to be the upcoming president. I don't think that's a shock to me, because he's proactive and engaging. And it does two things. One, it allows you to get direct experience and direct exposure with an external organization, professional organization that has systems in place to run, so you can get exposure to professional level people. It also allows you to potentially seek out that person as a reference in the future, an adult reference. If you give me a reference to your buddy happens to be a student of yours, I'm not going to call that guy. I'm thinking you're wasting my time giving me a reference that I shouldn't call in the first place. My 2 cents.
I had some 2 cents.
Is it important for students to have a professional social media presence such as LinkedIn? If so, how important?
I already weighed in on that one, so I'll let y'all answer.
I think it's important to have a LinkedIn profile for the specific reason of networking. Networking is such an important part of your career and will be an important part of your career. It is a good opportunity for you to house that information for you and connect with people. When you talk about Facebook, I don't know if MySpace is even there anymore. I have a Facebook, but I never check it, my Facebook account. Twitter, I mean, you just have to be very careful with the professionalism because there are some companies that will check Facebook and they'll Google you and things like that. So it is very important to keep, a reputation that you would like to be representative of who you are. So, again, just be careful. I think LinkedIn's a fine organization. I mean, it's fine to keep, your network going. I think it really will help you develop that, whether it's an elevator speech. So when you're filling out your profile on LinkedIn, it's going to help you think through what are the things that you've accomplished over, the last couple of years through school, etc. But Facebook, I am a little concerned with if it gets a little bit off and somebody gets connected with you that's within the organization. Google, if somebody Googles you, and actually it's something that's very interesting. One of the candidates that we hired, and actually he's one of my program participants, he actually Googled me during my interview. And we had a long conversation about stalking, which was kind of funny. It's all about how you present it. But it really drove the conversation that he and I had because he had a little information about my background. Now, with that being said, he probably wouldn't have joined the organization if it was not a professional connection point. So even in my position, it's important to maintain a level of professionalism and that sort of thing. So again, it does go both ways, and it is very important for you to kind of understand that. Because people do judge, unfortunately, without knowing the whole story.
Coming from a branding agency, personal branding is something that we're harping to all of our senior executives at the agencies that we happen to consult with. And to me, it's mandatory that you have a portfolio. Back in the day, only creatives needed a portfolio. Today, everyone, especially an advertising agency, has to have a portfolio of actionable work with proven ROI or proven results. So we do search. Automatically, I have my intern automatically do a deep search on you. We go to the 10th page on Google to figure out who you are. So be cautious as far as what you put out there and your thought leadership. And to make sure you put thought leadership content out there if you want to be positioned as an expert. In the consulting world, you're expected to speak at a high level and know exactly what the industry is about, and I want to see that. So we're diving deep because we're trying to weed down the resumes down to the top 10. So.
Stuart, this is a very short question, but I'm going to start with you, Stuart. What's your favorite part of recruiting college students?
So to be honest with you, most of my career I have recruited college students. I've worked at a different level, but recently we have been doing a lot of work here. I don't know if you've seen TIA Crime doing some work with, in the IT community here, and bringing on, we're actually building out a talent associate and internship roles there. And my favorite part is the energy, because what I find is the people that come out, they present well, they interview well, really excited, and, you know, a lot of times they want to be with that company. And, you know, when you get this individual on board, they're like a sponge, and they soak it up, and they just want to be part of the organization and grow their career. So I really enjoyed watching people come in and develop and be excited about the opportunity. So many times, you know, I spend a lot of my time dealing with people that have worked for a long time, and we sell them, and they forgot that it's fun to work and to learn, and, you know, they get a little bitter, and so I like, it's refreshing for them.
I feel it's the intellectual curiosity of a student. They're always asking questions, and as long as they're asking the right questions or the strategic questions, or not the questions that waste my time, then I'm more than willing to take the time. And I love that. And people that seek out the information, and those are the people that stick out. Two candidates stick in my mind. One was a student that I met at the board of the American Marketing Association. His name is Chris Simborowski. He went to every single meeting. You know, he knew that I worked at an agency that he wanted to work for. Long story short, I hired him as an intern because he had that energy and that curiosity to always understand and learn more about the industry. And you know, it's almost like a compliment. Like, he's respecting, you know, my time. Another, and as a result, today he's now the head of social media at a major agency. Another is Wei Sei, the former president of SIFE. He was an intern. He met me on the street of all places. He just built a relationship, a rapport. And as a result, the students build your network now. You know, the book that I gave to all my interns is Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferraz. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. It's not just about networking, but it's just about building true relationships. And my advice for everyone, no matter how old you are, even if you graduate in May, build your network, nurture it, and it is not just a one-shot, hey, this is me, and that's it, and expect me to follow with you. Give me some updates, you know, provide me with intel. You know, just be tasteful about it, and it'll be a sign. So.
I would say mine is definitely, hands down, the relationship building. I still have, I'll say relationships, I'm still connected and speak to from time to time candidates that I recruited and may not have ever hired, like 15 years ago. They stand out in your mind, and it's, hey, it didn't work out between the two of us, but, you know, I follow their career, they follow mine. Certainly in my industry, it sounds like public accounting is a large industry. It's not, and it's very incestuous in many cases. Don't burn bridges, people, I'll see you again. And they come back around, and it's so cool that if I'm at, you know, at a campus and somebody that I recruited like 10 years ago is with another firm and they're at the booth, I'm like, oh my gosh, how are you? So the relationship part of it, don't stalk me, but the relationship part of it, that's by far my favorite, because it makes you feel like, well, you're probably closer, but it makes you feel like you're still young or whatever, and it's cool to follow people's careers all the way through.
I would say the same thing. I've been in college recruiting for quite a while, and nothing makes my day like seeing someone that, you know, I may have met. We did an internship, and I remember how green they were, and, you know, bright eyes, and sky's the limit. And then, you know, 4 years later, they're, you know, an assistant manager somewhere or in operations, and, you know, we track everybody every year so that we can see kind of what our ROI is to the company. We actually have a better retention rate on the college side than hiring externals. But it's great to see them kind of progress through the company. Like, there's just this sense of pride, like
It's
I'm
like
your
your
biggest
child walking or something.
Yeah, I'm like your biggest cheerleader as you kind of progress through your career.
Energy, enthusiasm, watching people develop, and I enjoy seeing people stumble and raise their hand and say, oh my goodness, I need help, going to the right people, just watching them grow up. So I've done this for many years, 13, 14 years, and again, just watching people develop in their career is just such a huge reward.
Thank you, everyone. Those were wonderful answers. All right, so this is the part of the panel discussion that's open to all of you. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists?
got one.
Um,
Is there a direct connection between GPA and job performance?
Is there a
Is there
connection?
a direct connection you see job performance and GPA?
You know what's funny, and I bet each one of us might have a different answer. A question that I ask candidates is, do you think your GPA is a reflection of your ability? I personally don't think a GPA is a reflection of your ability. One, because I did not have a 4.0, quite honestly, I think I'm fantastic. But I have seen so many students who had, in the accounting world, 4.0s, President of Beta Alpha Psi on paper, killed it. Passed CPA first time around, but God love them, they can come into the office and can't take what's here and apply it. I've seen somebody who had a 2.7, had a death in the family, paid their way through school, blah, 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 and they came in, and you don't have to teach them anything, they just go, oh, I get it, and they apply it. So for me personally, those of us who have GPA thresholds, some of it is we're weeding out the 500 resumes. So let's say, 3.0, just because I don't have time to fool the rest of you. But I personally don't think it's a reflection of your ability. Do any of you?
No, I think it depends, honestly, I think in some ways it depends on the position, to an extent, but I think ultimately, people can come a long way with a lower GPA, and some people might not be successful with an extremely high GPA. I think it's the whole package, and that's why we do interviews, that's why we do the social receptions the evening before, that's why we do behavioral-based interviewing to say, okay, how did you deal with something in your past? Because it's an indicator of how you'll deal with it in the future. So, it's the whole package mostly, but it is, unfortunately, we do have to weed out, so we do put a minimum.
Yeah, but I've seen some people with huge 4.0 GPAs that just can't perform, so.
So agree. Yeah, no, we understand, yeah. And sometimes we just have to, it's a risk that we take by saying, okay, we're not gonna look at a 2.9. It's a risk, because we're only gonna take the look at those above. It is a risk, you're absolutely right, and we understand it. It's just, we don't have the manpower, the resources, the time to review that many resumes, so. But we've mentioned networking and building relationships. I have to say, I did not have a 3.0. I think I've been very successful. I think I'm fabulous. What's the word? Fabulous. I'm just kidding. But it's all about working hard, getting to know people, proving yourself. Just because you don't have a high GPA, just because you don't get a job right out of college, it doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. So,
Just own it, and
Yeah.
don't wait for me to go, dude, why do you only have a 3.0 or whatever you have? Come out of the gate, put it on your resume, don't
Yeah.
hide it, we're gonna find it. Put it on your resume, and know what, out of the gate, just say, hey, you probably noticed right out of the gate, my GPA is 2.8 or whatever it is, and, I really hope to have better, but I switched majors, whatever it was, and if it's just, I just don't do good at tests, did you in college, what did you do? Great way to start a conversation.
yeah.
Just
And you might
own
have
it.
to work a little harder. But you know what? It's going to make you that much better an employee in the long run.
Oh, okay. I have two questions, but the first one, it goes along with what we just spoke about. Susan, you mentioned earlier that you went to the school and interviewed people who were great on paper and their resumes, but then you kind of noticed that they weren't performing well, as he mentioned. So do you have like a percentage or an estimate of people that look good on resumes, but they don't really perform as well as that resume says they do?
No, and I think that's one of the challenges that companies have is really being able to say, okay, this is a good resume. That's why it's so important for us to get on campus, get to spend time with you all early on in the process, get to know you, so it actually limits a little bit of that risk of just going, I'm looking at the resume and that's what I'm going on. But with that said, I don't know that I have specifics, and I have to say, not to backtrack, but the resumes weren't all 4.0. There were some with 3.5, so they were strong GPAs, but overall they just weren't prepared to interview, is ultimately. I don't think they were bad candidates. I think they weren't prepared to interview. They weren't able to sell their story or tell what they could, who they were, their situations, and how they were able to
translate that into the work world. And it's hard when you're academic and you don't know what's on the other side in the business world. It's sometimes hard, but with networking, talking to professors, going to the Career Center, getting contacts at different companies, talking to parents, friends who work at companies, or, you know, that's gonna help you. What are they looking for? You know, leadership, teamwork, relationship building, communication. I guarantee that's probably very similar, you know, skill set. So what do you have that identifies those skill sets that you can tell the story or explain how you represented those traits?
Okay.
You know, and I'm sorry, I hope I answered your question. So
You did, you
again,
did.
I don't think they were bad. Again, this was an interview, so I can't tell you if they were performing poorly. They just weren't well prepared for interviewing.
And then once you move from academia to actually being in the job world and you are applying online, they have a job description, but like what is the estimate of the applicants that you interview that don't have the desired experience for the online job applications? How many of those people do you actually interview?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
I do.
Like online that you
How many
have?
times do you post for like a certain role and you get all the valets and the waiters that come through that don't meet? Well, like what you were saying,
Okay.
we specifically put thought, and I think that's what you're referencing, where he said we specifically put thought into the job description and
Right.
the posting. If you don't meet those, please don't apply because you're gonna go right in the bucket. And I think that's what
Yeah.
you're talking about is what percentage don't
Yes.
listen to his advice. Yeah?
For
Yeah.
us, it's actually, it's zero. For any large company or government, we work with government contracts, so we live under the OFCCP. And those job descriptions are written very, very carefully. When it says, you know, sometimes you'll see preferred qualifications, that's fine, we can play with those. But we cannot legally look at anyone that doesn't meet the minimum requirements for that job.
And the applicant tracking system, well, actually, we never even see it. It boots you out automatically, so you don't even make it in front of the eyes of anybody.
Is that,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yes,
I'm sorry,
yes.
but now I.
During the actual interview process, how do you feel about notes? Because I get nervous and the questions that I have for you may fly out of my head, so I'll bring like a pad with notes
Oh,
to make sure I hit those points.
we absolutely want you to come with, or I shouldn't say we, I apologize, but absolutely come prepared. Do your research, understand what it is that you want to learn. An interview goes two ways. So it's very important for you to learn as much about the person and the company that you're interviewing with. So I think it's fabulous. Again, I use the word fabulous. If you bring notes, questions, it means you're prepared, you're thoughtful, you're looking for, you're serious. And you want to make sure you get your questions answered, and it's important to you to say, I'm making a decision about that company as well as that company's making a decision on me.
It's not looked down upon.
No.
I was wondering if any of you made hiring mistakes that you're willing to admit, and have you done anything to identify how that mistake happened?
I don't think, I was about to say, I don't think any of us, if not some of you haven't.
Well, we were talking about honesty earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's all subjective. I mean, you know, you don't know, it's a risk, and there's been plenty, I'm sure we all have horror stories. There's been people I've interviewed, I'm like, you rock, this is gonna be great, this is gonna be great, and like the first day on the job, I'm like, who the heck are you and where'd you come from? And then there's some people that you just, in your gut, you don't feel it's right, something's not there, they come and they turn out to be your rock star. I think it happens to the best interviewers, I mean, there's just, how many of you have taken a job that you thought you were gonna love, and week 1, 2, 3, you're like, oh, this isn't at all what I thought it would be. To your point, it works both ways.
Yeah, and you know, yes, there's been many on both sides, yes. One thing I'd recommend, is if you're asking questions, one of the things that's important is, you know, we're talking about networking, say your name and what level you are, freshman, sophomore, junior, maybe your major. Again, just a good opportunity for you to get your name out there in front of some pretty big employers in Charlotte.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi.
My name's Mohammed, and I'm an economics major. I'm a senior.
Excellent.
I wanted some examples of things we might want to quantify on a resume. For example, monetary amounts or people we work with in groups. You know, sometimes those can be hard to dig, whether or not you guys would care if it's an estimate or would you guys want an exact number, you know, stuff involved in particular to that.
I think, real quick, is if you work on projects, worked in a group situation or setting, if you answer the question, well, we did this, okay, great, what did you do, right? So be prepared with what did you do in a project that, you know, in that setting, what did you do, what did you bring to the table? As far as like quantifying, you know, I guess it's choice, it depends on the situation, the project. It can be very valuable information if you can speak intelligently about it. But again, if it's on the resume, we're probably going to ask about it. So if you say, hey, I worked with Adobe Photoshop, but you only installed it on your PC, you know, we're going to start probing more and more and more. Pretty soon, half your resume is gone. And then, you know, it's kind of awkward. So.
And, you know, it's okay to put estimates, but just make sure you put estimated, saved X billion dollars, you know, or something like that. But tell the story, and because when you look at a resume, you want to be able to have, again, we've been talking about how many resumes we see, and so how do you differentiate yourself? So you're telling a little bit more of a story by quantifying it, by putting a few details. So if you were a sales associate or if you worked at a restaurant, and, you know, it's like consistently was employee of the month, or 5 times employee of the month. That's, you know, if you say a couple of times I was employee of the month, well, I'm like, but I was 8 times employee of the month. That's going to say something different. That's what I'm saying is quantify, really tell the story, and you can do it in very simple, easy, bulleted ways. It just gives you that little bit of edge to tell a little bit more of your story. It gets easier when you get farther along in your career, so it's just important to practice it now and build. We talk about extracurricular activities, being a member of organizations, you know, Beta Alpha Psi. Are you going to say just a member? If you are just the member, that's great. But if you're the president, you better darn well put that you're the president. And that's what I mean quantifying it. Okay.
Hi, my name's Steven. I'm a sophomore. I was just wondering, what's a good length for a resume, and if like a short but solid resume?
Depends on your font. Don't do, I'm old, people, as much as I think I'm fabulous, I'm old.
I am too.
And if you try, it's nice to have it on one page. I will admit, put the highlights on one page. But if you're trying so hard to get so much stuff on one page and you use like 8-point font, you're going to annoy the fire out of me because it makes it harder to read. So if you end up, and it's all good stuff, and you end up going to 2 pages, at least for me, don't sweat it. Just make sure the really good stuff that you've put on that top page.
If you do go to 2 pages, I'm a big proponent of 1 page. Make sure that you have almost the same heading that you do on your first page on your second page. Typically, those, you know, if you take a stack of resumes back from a career fair, I probably have 100 to 120 resumes. If I can't match up the paper from page 1 to page 2, you're now half of what you came to our table as, because now I only have the first part of that resume. And as much as we want to keep those together, and you know, I scan resumes into, you know, for my business partners to see. So, you know, and if they're printing them, other people use printers, you know, those pages can get separated. So make sure that if it does run to 2 pages, that you're using the same title top.
And if it runs to 2 pages, make sure it's important information.
Not your
And that's a good
references.
opportunity for you to have somebody else read it.
Hi, I'm Maria. I was wondering if you had any advice to those who don't exactly have the most experience in the field. I know a lot of the time I get rejection for saying I don't have any experience.
I'm sorry, I can hardly hear you.
Um,
I'm trying to read your
This
lips.
is great
and I'm like-
practice for you, by the way.
Yes.
well, I think
You want to just speak into it.
I was wondering if you had any advice to those who don't exactly have the most experience in the field that they're going into. I know a lot of the time you get rejection saying you don't have enough experience, but how do you go about getting that experience?
I expect that you have none. So
Yeah.
for me and what I do, I expect you have none.
And based on the programs I think that a lot of us look for, we don't expect somebody to have a lot of experience, and it kind of goes back to, understanding what you have done is not directly related, but how you can translate that into a strong work ethic, leadership, teamwork. It's those other traits that actually will build a strong employee. But I would recommend an internship is a great way to kind of feel like you're building that confidence to say, I do have a little experience. And then really do your research and understand what the experiences that they are looking for. I think most companies that come to college don't expect somebody to have significant experience. So again, just, find ways to translate what you do have experience in into the business that you're, or the position that you're looking for. And network. Yeah, that's right.
I was gonna say also, get involved in some organizations. Probably if you went out to, on your main page and pulled up, there's probably 400, 600, 800 organizations on campus. Join some of those that you think are potential. You're in the marketing one. If you wanna get into HR, join the student chapter of SHRM. That's gonna look great on your resume that you're serious about getting into a specific field. The same with accounting. If you're not involved in SAFE, you should be. Big proponent of that. You can do project work that's specific to if you're in accounting, operations, and that starts to look like, that you actually have, you have actual work experience in those areas. And that's without even having an internship. So getting involved in, kind of those extra activities can go a long way.
I am Jingjing. I'm sophomore at Virgin Finance and Math. My question is, if I didn't leave a good impression for the first interview, would you consider giving me a second interview, like if I apply, like 1 year later or half a year later?
I would say for me, it depends. We keep, whether you know it or not, it's probably you know now, when you're done interviewing, and sometimes some of us probably do it at career fairs too, depending on the size fair, anybody who meets you fills out an evaluation. When you come in and interview, everybody who meets you fills out an evaluation. And then at the end, when you're gone, we kind of debrief what you think, what you think, what you think. So let's say a year later, you come back through, there's been plenty of people that I've entertained and some hired. It just depends on what's on it. Sometimes you end up saying, hey, I need 10 people, and you really like number 12, 13, and 14, but you really only need 10. If 12, 13, and 14 come back a year later, you might say, hey, I liked them, I just didn't have enough slots. It just really depends on why you didn't make a good impression, and what those evaluations were.
And it ultimately might not be a bad impression, it just might be numbers were against you. It could be you were number 3 and 4 and we only have 2 positions. So make sure you understand that. I think it's important though to continue to network, be self-aware. We talked about being self-aware when you're at the career fair and not standing there while the people are packing up and ready to go and halfway out the door and you're still wanting to chit-chat. So be self-aware. So you're gonna know if you maybe didn't leave a good impression. If you send a nice email saying, hey, really interested, and they say, thank you, but not at this time. And if you ask the question, would it be appropriate for me to apply next year? Again, it's being self-aware and going, you know what, and sometimes just be prepared. If you don't get the job, it actually is probably a good thing. Now, the next year, it might be you have the same opportunity and the opportunity might come your way, but there might be a better place for you, or you might find the better opportunity for you, so don't get discouraged. Again, it could be a numbers game, it could be you're just not the right fit, it could be, maybe lack of impression. But ask, at least try and ask the question and say, what was it that I could have done better? Don't harp on the negative, but what can I have done better? And ask good questions.
Hi, my name is Valerie. I'm a junior International Business International Studies major. I have 2 quick questions. What do you consider a good length for an internship? And do you still find that within the hiring process that the conventional interviews are used, or is it gearing more towards situational and behavioral interviews?
I kind of don't have a choice with internships with us. I mean, they're very set periods of time. And like right now, my tax interns are there, January 3rd to April 17th. So yeah, it's, but I do think 3 months is an appropriate time, at least for us, to kind of get a good tryout and see. Some of it's driven by the schools though for us. Some schools that don't have a formal intern program, somebody's wanted to defer for a semester, you can have them longer. So it just, I don't know if there's a better or worse, it just kind of is what it is.
I think there's some co-ops that might be semesters long, so I wouldn't worry about that. I think your other question was behavioral, like situational interviews, and, it depends on the interviewer, to be quite honest, and again, you all can answer, but, we would like to say, in order to mitigate risk and make sure we're staying on track and building consistency, that everyone asks similar behavioral-based interviewing, the studies have proven that based on how you react to something in the past is how you most likely will react in the future. But there are people who will go in and want to know very technical abilities of the person they're interviewing. So it just depends, and ultimately it depends on the person's mood. It's a lot of things that play into it, but I think there are a lot of companies that are going into kind of the traditional interview where it is situational or technical to really understand, do you have the technical skills in order to do what we need you to do?
My advice as you're evaluating an internship is if I were a student, I would say, all right, if I pursue this internship, no matter how long it is, am I going to accomplish meeting an objective? In other words, am I going to fill a requirement of a future position that I want that I don't have right now, but it's totally going to get me there. And as a result, it's setting you up for the next opportunity. But if it's not going to provide anything and you're just a paper pusher, bypass that all day long. So be cognizant of that.
Please say one more.
My name is Thomas Eaton. I'm a senior accounting and finance major. What's generally the first or most important thing you look for in a resume? I know you generally said you look for about 10 seconds, so I was wondering what you really can see in that amount of time.
I think you have the natural things that weed the stack down. The GPA, the grad date, are they looking for an internship full-time? So some of those things, that goes first. So once you've made that stack of, here's whatever that organization's threshold is for, we're looking for people who are graduating on this date and have this GPA. I think the next thing, it's going to vary every individual. The next thing I look for, I always go to the very bottom of the resume and see if somebody noted if they put themselves through school. I personally have unbelievable respect for people who have decent grades and paid their way through school, because I didn't. And I think it says a lot about their work ethic. So for me personally, I go to the bottom first. And then I start reading backwards. So if you want to catch my eye, put all your good stuff at the bottom, because I start at the bottom and go back. But I think it probably depends on each person, just years of seeing so many resumes, you pick up things to make you as an individual more effective, and then it's going to vary based on the organization that you belong to as well.
It's funny because that's exactly what I do though. I kind of start at the beginning to say, okay, I'm just qualifying somebody. So degree, GPA, graduation date, do you fit the qualifications that I'm looking for? And ultimately, I do. Now, I look at the bottom, but because usually there's the leadership activities that somebody has, and then their software skills. So in the group that I support, Excel is very important, PowerPoint. So I look to see, okay, do they have some skills there? And then actually, I do work my way up and say, okay, if they've met that criteria, it's like, okay, yes or maybe. So I have my yes and maybe pile, and then I like, do they have work experience? Have they had an internship before? Do they have misspelled words? Do they have, it just depends. Does it, based on what I've seen in my yes piles, are there jobs where, they didn't really have to go out and get it for themselves? Does it have content, I guess? And then I put it in the yes or the maybe pile. But I do the exact same thing. I start at the top, go to the bottom, and then kind of like somewhere in the middle, I kind of review within 10 to 12 seconds. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I also look at, you mentioned it earlier, and it's the truth. I also look at, did somebody, somebody in my firm say, hey, I know this guy, keep an eye out for him. That doesn't mean you're automatically going to get a job, but where I might fly past your resume, I go, oh God, that's that guy Charlie Greer mentioned, you know, that his next door neighbors, brothers, whatever. Let me at least give him a genuine look. That, for me, is why I think every one of you should be on LinkedIn. When I started talking about that, it's because, you know, what your friend's daddy's cousin do or whatever, and is it in that industry, and if he knows somebody or you can network through LinkedIn, you just might get, I'm not saying you'll get the job, but you'll get somebody who won't go, okay, let me go to the bottom and read it. No, 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 it's, oh, so-and-so pointed this out, I promised I would give it a serious look, and you just look a little bit more.
Network. It's important.
All right, well, thank you so much. This has been a great evening and a very productive discussion. I'd like to thank each of our panelists for sharing their considerable expertise with us, particularly after a busy day of work for them. Let's give them one round of applause. We'd also like to thank the Belk College of Business for its assistance in publicizing this event and for its financial support. The Career Center also assisted us by reaching out to students seeking career-related help. And finally, SIPE, if any of you are not familiar, we're a community service organization committed to changing lives through positive power of business. Our tagline is "Ahead for Business, a Heart for the World." A couple of reminders: SIPE will be hosting another panel event with recent alumni in March, so they will be talking about what they've learned since leaving college. I hope you'll put that on your calendar. And finally, please leave your completed survey at the door with a member of our team. Your feedback really does matter to us. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful night.
Okay. You have class now?
Was half the exam earlier.